In this episode, we reviewed Act of Violence from 1948. This film noir was directed by Fred Zinnemann. The screenplay was by Robert L. Richards. It was based on a story by Collier Young, and it starred Van Heflin, Robert Ryan, Janet Leigh, Mary Astor, and Phyllis Thaxter. Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies. This is a YouTube video podcast exploring storytelling on film, as well as interviews with industry professionals who work in film, television, and the arts and other areas of the art form. And I want to welcome back to the show Cheyney Ryan, who is the son of one of the stars of this film, Robert Ryan. Cheyney is a senior research fellow at Oxford University's Institute for Ethics, Law, and Armed Conflict, where he focuses on nonviolence, pacifism, and the critique of just war theory. Cheyney previously taught at the University of Oregon as a professor of philosophy and professor of law, and co-founded the Peace Studies program and the master's program in conflict resolution. He has also taught at Northwestern University, Harvard Law School, and Boston University, and he has been named one of the leading scholars in peace and conflict studies by the Washington Post. Cheyney, welcome back. Thanks for joining me again.
Great to be back. Great to be back.
It's great to have you as we dive into another film that your father was a lead in. When we spoke on email, you had said that this was a film you knew better than some of the others. Do you remember the first time you saw it?
I don't really. I mean, I didn't. As I've told you before, Robert. I saw all these movies for the first time on television many years after they were made. There wasn't any way to see them in a theater. Well, there were revival theaters, but I'm not sure they showed movies like this. I probably first saw it maybe 15, 20 years ago. So it was,
okay.
Yeah, it was not a long time ago. And I probably saw it. I don't make a point of watching all my father's movies. I don't watch them just because my dad is in them, but I'm sure I watched this one because I'm interested in film noir,
right.
And I knew that it was I had reason to believe it was a good movie, so that's why I watched the first time.
Do you remember your father mentioning anything about this film over the years?
I really don't. It seems to have. I looked it up in terms of his career. And there seemed to be a kind of a cluster of movies bunched there together in the late 40s, early 50s. And they were probably mainly a result of Crossfire and his success in that. But there were a bunch of movies, and I think I would hear the titles. But by the time I was old enough to be aware of things, he'd moved on to other things. And he wasn't, unlike some of the other films, I don't think there was anyone in the movie that he had a personal relationship with.
Right.
Sometimes you'd hear about a movie because he was still friends with someone who was in it, but he was, colleagues with particularly Janet Leigh, who he'd worked with in another movie, but they weren't friends. I mean, he didn't socialize or anything like that.
Well, yeah, because it occurred to me when I was watching it that the other films we discussed were directors he had worked with more than once. But Zinnemann, this is the only film he did with Fred Zinnemann, who I know, just talking through email, we were both discussing how he was such a fantastic filmmaker, but he is relatively sort of not discussed much, I would say, as well. I don't know. Did you read anything about that just from looking at this again?
I didn't. I plan to, though. I was going to look it up in Thompson's, biography of film. I did look up Van Heflin, who I'm also intrigued by his career, but I didn't have time to look up Zinnemann. But this guy's a serious director. I mean, he made and the sheer variety of movies that he made is astonishing. He directed Oklahoma. He directed Member of the Wedding, a completely different type of film. He, at the same time, he does these kind of A-list Hollywood movies like From Here to Eternity and whatever. Extraordinary. who else would have that range? You know, Howard Hawks maybe, but the sheer variety of movies that he directed is extraordinary. He didn't have a long career though. He seemed to have, well, he did in some sense, but it seemed as if he spent a lot of time laboring in Hollywood before he got going.
Yeah, he was already working in, I'm just looking on IMDb because he had done a number of short films before doing a feature film. And I know from the book that Jim Jordan wrote about your, sorry, Jim Jordan, that's another writer. J.R. Jones wrote about your father, was that he had said this was the first film he felt that he was really in control of. And some of the other films he did around this time also dealt with characters coming back from the war. You have The Search with Montgomery Clift, The Men with Brando, Teresa. So, and he, apparently his parents, he had found out in 1948 when this came out that his parents had died in a concentration camp in during the war. So
Yeah,
this obviously was meant something to him. This theme,
he
anyways.
brought a lot of feeling to it, and I do know that when my father passed away, Lamont Johnson, who's a director, put together a sort of a film tribute to my dad, and Zinnemann was one of the people that he interviewed extensively. So even though dad didn't work with Zinnemann again, I think that they had a very good working relationship and admired each other a great deal. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's good to know. That's good to know. Did you ever meet Janet Leigh or any of the cast here, or do you recall? Because he had worked with her again, so I thought maybe you would have met her, but I'm not sure.
Well, I met Janet Leigh because I was on the set of The Naked Spur.
Naked Spur, right?
And quite frankly, now that you mention it, I think I have a photograph of all of us posed for publicity purposes.
Oh, wow.
But I don't remember. I don't remember. I don't remember her. And I don't, as I said, I mean, I don't really remember if I met them. But you know, you have to remember, I was born the year this movie was made,
Yeah,
so I wouldn't remember it that well. You know.
Of course, yeah, because like I said, this is one of the films where he only worked with most of these people once. I know that you in the other films we discussed, you get interested in the people with the smaller parts. Was there anyone in this film that you found interesting? Some of the more supporting roles?
Well, I think Mary Astor makes the film, quite frankly. I mean,
she was great.
I felt it's interesting because I've seen the movie before, but quite frankly, some of the plot I really didn't remember, but I took that to be a credit to the movie, that the movie goes in different directions at times, which are not predictable.
Right.
Because when the movie starts out, I kind of thought you could kind of think, well, I'm seeing Cape Fear again. I'm seeing.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm seeing someone who's going to come back and terrorize the wife and whatever. But then I think the movie really gets interesting when Van Heflin meets Mary Astor. She's an extraordinarily interesting career.
Oh, yeah.
She had a career for 100 years. She started out in silent films. And she's 40 years old. They cast her in this movie. She was 40 years old, which is an interesting bit of casting with a kind of a sort of a femme fatale actress.
Yeah.
She's similar to, you know, what it reminded me of is in the movie Crossfire, there's a whole subplot where the accused soldier ends up with Gloria Graham in her apartment. Right. And it's kind of the same.
Yeah, it is.
What am I doing here? And who are you? And whatever, except Mary Astor, I think, I love Gloria Graham, but Mary Astor is very interesting because she keeps talking about how she wanted to get kicks. Yeah. Which in that era was a slang word for narcotics.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought she just meant a good time, like, oh, I wouldn't need my escape or something.
No, if you see movies of that time, or even as late as Touch of Evil, you know, they're talking about getting kicks, and what they're meaning is
I didn't know that.
mainly smoking marijuana. But I think Mary Astor, I have to say though, other than Maltese Falcon, she made 150 movies, and I don't
Yeah.
really know any of them.
Well, I was looking through her IMDb as well. Her resume on IMDb, and you're right. Other than the Maltese Falcons, Across the Pacific, and her last one, Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte,
Right.
with Betty Davis. I didn't know a lot of her films either, but I also thought she was really good. At first I thought, well, why is this woman who's clearly a prostitute propositioning the main character, Frank, played by Van Heflin, why is she getting so emotionally wrapped up in his world? And I'm still not too sure. I mean, I understand it was a way to get him into that LA underworld, the crime world, where then those other guys were gonna, basically try to extort him and get his money to, and then kill Joe off, who's been hounding him the whole film. But the fact that she got so emotionally wrapped up, I'm not too sure how I feel about that. What did you think of that? Did you think that was merely a device, or did you think that worked?
Well, I think it was, I mean, it was primarily a device, because otherwise, as I said, it would have been just too linear. It would have been just
Yeah.
waiting for them to square off at the end. But at the same time, I thought the relationship was very interesting. I mean, an example is that up until the end of the movie, Van Heflin is still lying to his wife about what he's doing. He doesn't tell her, even after he's told her the truth, he's still not being candid with her about what's going on.
Right.
Whereas Mary Astor, he's truthful with, and
Oh, that's a good point.
yeah, he
Yeah.
doesn't feel any need to bullshit her. And maybe at the end of the movie, Janet Leigh says something about, well, I thought you were too good for me, and now I realize you're flawed too. And maybe that was something that maybe we're supposed to think, well, maybe Van Heflin was burdened by having to be too good. And so he meets this hooker in the bar who tells him how great looking he is all the time. And,
Yeah.
maybe he kind of feels, well, I can let my guard down with her. And I would say, I don't mean to keep referencing back to Crossfire, but there's an interesting dimension of Crossfire that I don't remember the actor's name, but the accused soldier is kind of at ease with Gloria Graham in a way that
Right.
he's clearly not with his wife, who he doesn't even want to go back to in the
Right.
film. So it probably has to do with the sense that Van Heflin is damaged and knows he's damaged, and has been trying to cover it up, been trying to pretend that he's someone that he's not.
Yeah.
So I thought but you're right that why she would
Yeah.
feel as sympathetic to him is not clear, though she does ask him for $100 at the end. So
That's right. Well, I thought, okay, is it part of it that she knew he had said that he had a lot of money, so she, again, it's a little bit of where the femme fatale comes in, where she thought, okay, I can get something out of him, but at a certain point, she's even holding his hand. I mean, it's like she assumes the wife role, or the girlfriend role. But other than that, when she brings him to her apartment, she says, well, people often have two problems. They're broke, or they need love, or they're both. So I thought, okay, well, maybe she sees something in him that's the type of person that she's not used to. So there was some kind of connection, but I don't think that would really be enough for her to stick her neck out to this to this degree. It had a couple of flaws that from my point of view anyways. I thought that was one, even though it worked to get it into the underworld story. But you're right, the first half of the film, it is like Cape Fear. It almost felt like a horror film, as Joe Parkson is after Frank Enley, and you don't know why. He's just getting on this Greyhound bus. You see him up the top in New York, and he he gets a gun in this from this tenement, and he looks in the phone book, he circles the name, and so we know who he's after. And Frank looks like he's this war hero. He's this well-liked person in the community. And so because it's from his point of view, it turns into Frank and Lee's point of view, from being stalked by this man. I felt sorry for him, and it wasn't really until then you found out why Robert Ryan as Joe Parkson was after him that the sympathy went then the other way. But what I thought was clever was that if the whole thing had been from your father's character's point of view, we may have never had any sympathy for Van Heflin. We would have just been this Nazi sympathizer who deserves to get what he wants. I thought that was clever on regards to the screenplay. I don't know if that just structurally. I know you were a playwright, so I thought maybe that was something that would have popped out to you. I'm not sure if it did.
No, I think you're absolutely right. Though I'm not sure how ambivalent we're supposed to feel about Van Heflin, because when he explains it himself, he's kind of says, well, this is what I did, but I don't really know why I did it. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I guess I was just doing it for myself.
Right. Right.
And by the end of the film, I kind of felt the guy was just clueless, because and then because he does kind of go along, when Mary Astor takes him in to talk to the guy, he kind of goes along with it.
He does the same thing all over again. He tells the loan sharks where he is, just like he told even though he's had this experience of guilt, but under pressure he does whatever he has to do to survive, which I thought was interesting. It's not really till the very end that he learns some kind of a lesson.
Yeah, and the end of the movie, I don't know. I think it's a very good movie. I like it better than On Dangerous Ground, quite frankly.
Oh, me too. Yeah, me too.
Because it has more kind of twists and turns. You really can't. I mean, with On Dangerous Ground, I thought, yeah, Robert Ryan and Ida Lupino are going to end up together.
Right?
Come on.
Yeah.
Whereas this one, I thought it was quite interesting the way they took it. And Van Heflin is an interesting actor. I don't really understand his career either, quite frankly. And I don't know whether he plays the everyman. I think that's, and I have to admit, I don't know that many of his movies. I did look him up too.
Neither do I. It's just when you mentioned him, I immediately searching him now. I know he was in Shane. He was in a lot of movies, but I don't know his career very well either. But yeah, he's certainly, you're right. He has that everyman quality. Certainly.
He has the everyman quality, and he was, I thought, the scene where he's walking down the tunnel near the end of the movie, and it's like, this is really now messed up. I thought he was good in that.
Yeah, that was a great scene.
But I don't know. Well, let me say, first of all, I'm interested in. I'm not just interested in the minor characters, and we'll get to Phyllis Thaxter in a moment.
Oh yes, yes.
But first of all, I can't be the only person who confuses Van Heflin and Van Johnson. I always confuse one or the other. And he had an odd, in some ways his career was similar to my dad's, in that, he was never a big A-list movie star, but he had a long career. He was in good movies. I think in retrospect, my father has benefited from the fact that, among other things, some of these film noir movies are now very highly regarded.
Yeah, exactly.
But that was something that was not the case during, his lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
So Van Heflin, so his career somewhat mystifies me, and he's the only other movie I know of his is Shane, which I think is a great movie. But he plays a passive character in that too. I mean, he's kind of the guy who's, reacting to what's going on and stuff. I think if I had thought about, so you're an actor, you tell me, but if I'd thought about would I have put someone else in the role, it would have been for the interactions with Janet Leigh, because I kind of think that maybe that's what is not filled out enough to kind of motivate, well, who is this guy and whatever. Now I thought Janet Leigh was very good in this film.
I agree. Yeah.
And I think she might have, I think her career, she might have gotten more professional prestige, if she hadn't been such a blonde bombshell. I mean, I think if she hadn't looked like she did, she might have had some more serious roles. Maybe that's what Hitchcock saw, in Psycho, is that she could do something. Because otherwise, she had a very good career, but it's in lighter material generally,
Yeah, I mean, other than A Touch of Evil comes to mind, the Orson Welles, and I know she was in Harper, but that's okay. I mean, it's a fun movie with Paul Newman. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I can't even think of and The Naked Spur, of course, with your father, but I can't think of like some really notable, really good Manchurian Candidate. But yeah, you're right. I think that's probably largely that has something to do with it. The bombshell.
Well, she never carried a picture. There was never a Janet Leigh movie. Though I should mention, by the way, she's in my favorite horror movie of all time, which is Night of the Lepus. I'm sure you haven't seen this movie.
Oh no, I haven't.
Well, this is a movie. It was near the end of her career.
Look this up.
Night of the Lepus, it was called. It was, these science fiction movies were all, the premise of them was all that because of nuclear radiation, ants were now, they had giant ants and giant whatever. And this was the last one of that. And it was giant rabbits. A lepus is a rabbit. And so the movie was about this town being attacked by giant rabbits. And the problem with the movie, Robert, is no matter how big a rabbit is, it's just not that scary. But that was the last good. And it was, actually, they spent the money on the movie. It didn't do very well. But she,
I found it here, 1972.
Right, Stuart Whitman. No, it had some good people in it.
Oh God, I'll have to see that. Just I'm curious now.
I thought, so that was where I thought, or maybe they just needed to spend more time. And, it didn't help that she's half of Van Heflin's age. So you're wondering, what is going on here? And this, in this case, the studio probably said, you need to use her. We're developing her as a star,
Right.
So I do think, and I think my dad's the role my dad does is not as interesting as some others. I mean, I think the movie's better than some others.
Yeah.
Clearly, the interaction with his girlfriend is underdeveloped, I think.
Yeah. I wanted more out of that because I mean, they had some really interesting moments, particularly when she was trying to talk him out of killing Frank, and she goes, well, don't you love me? And he goes, well, maybe I don't love you enough, and he drives off. I thought, wow. I mean, he was really out for he was really out for blood, but I mean, he's like this avenging angel, and he I believe that was I shouldn't take credit for that. J.R. Jones wrote that in your book on your father, which I thought was true. And he just looks like he's going to explode the entire film. I thought the rage, particularly the scene with Janet Leigh when he's telling her everything about how Frank told the Nazis about their escape plan. I mean, he just looks like he was gonna pop, which I thought was really effective. I remember when we last spoke, you had said when you watch his films, you're mostly seeing the character, but occasionally he'll react in a way that he may have in life. Was there anything here that you saw that was very him, or was it just very much this person?
I don't remember. I have to look at it again to kind of think about that. The the um, the thing about my dad, which may have mentioned to you when we talked about it last time, is that my dad was very funny, and
Right.
anyone who met him would mainly think this is a very funny guy, and that's a quality that generally doesn't come across in his screen role. Every once in a while there'll be a twinkle in his eye,
Right.
and every once in a while, I think in some of the better roles, quite frankly, there'll be an undertone of humor to it. But I assume with this role, I mean, he had just done Crossfire, where he played this intense kind of neurotic guy, and that's I assume when I saw how bunched together these films were.
Hmm.
The other thing was interesting about this film is it didn't really look like Dad. A thing about my father was, and here's something that I don't remember if it's in Jim's book, if I told him this. My father felt that his career, he would have had more opportunities in his career if he'd been better looking. And I think that the issue there was that when he was filmed, his features looked a lot thicker than they were. And I noticed that particularly in some of the later parts of the movie, and they're shooting him, sort of from the ground up, looming and stuff. And his features look very, very thick and kind of menacing and whatever.
Huh.
And they weren't the features of a kind of a romantic lead or something like that.
Right.
Because that was, people don't, as you know, people don't look in real life like they do on film.
No.
And they really don't look they really don't look that way in film if they're being lit in a certain
Right.
way.
Exactly.
So that was kind of interesting because, there too, I don't know if it's ever come up, but sometimes I'll talk to people and I'll say, well, among other things, my father didn't always look the way he did on film, the way he came across there, No, he had that, molar gnashing, menacing thing going on.
Definitely. Definitely. Well, one thing Jim wrote in the biography was that Zinnemann didn't want any makeup, so no one apparently had any makeup on, and he was influenced by documentary filmmakers, and so there was, I mean, so many real locations in this film throughout Los Angeles. I thought that added to the, the noir feel, and at the same time you had the German expressionism. It particularly popped out to me, the scene with Frank and his wife when he's telling her about informing on his unit to the Nazis, and when they're sitting down, it looks like it's the shadows from the fence are right on his face, which I mean, it sounds like a cliche, but because you see it so often in noirs, but that feeling of being trapped and in a dark space is so effective. And sometimes even in the house, I mean, they were literally turning the lights off so that Robert Ryan couldn't see them, so that that added to the spookiness of it all. I mean, I thought that really added to the darkness of the bleak feel of the entire movie.
Yeah, and it follows. In some ways, the movement is similar to On Dangerous Ground, in that On Dangerous Ground begins in the big city, and then they go out to like the snow, in upstate New York, light, barren, whiteness. And in this movie, it kind of begins in urban dark city.
Yeah.
But then they go fishing, and now suddenly
Right.
you're in Big Bear, wherever they filmed that. And I remember at the time, because I hadn't seen the movie in a while, and I remember kind of thinking, well, how long do they stay with this look? But then immediately he not only goes, he closes all the blinds.
Yes. Yeah.
He not only turns off the lights, he closes houses. I don't remember them having blinds like that, by the way, in the 1950s. He closes all the blinds. It's dark, dark, dark.
Yeah.
And then from that point on, it's dark, dark, dark. I mean, from that
Right.
point on, it's a classic noir movie.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I I particularly love that. I know when it got to the fishing scene, I thought, let's go back to the indoors, because it was getting a little too bright. One thing that sorry, go
the
ahead.
other, let me say though about
Yeah.
locations. I'm pretty sure that the final scene is shot in Glendale, because there's in the valley in LA, if you get on the train, the station is in Glendale. It looked, I haven't been there a long time, but it looked like Glendale. But the interesting thing is that would be hard to light an outdoor. They seem to have shot the entire thing on that location. And
was
it
that
was
the railway cars you're referring to? That's
it's where you get on the if you're taking the train like to San Francisco or something, you get on
I see.
at that station in Glendale. It's in the valley.
Yeah, it says here it's called the Angels Flight Funicular Railway Cars. Yeah, so it doesn't say, it just says it's in downtown Los Angeles.
Yeah, that's but in any event, clearly lighting that, well, you wouldn't be able to light it, basically.
Right.
The whole thing. Generally, that cinematographer, Surtees,
oh yeah,
he was the guy who did Last Picture Show. I mean, he made that movie, the look of that movie. Yeah, no, Bogdanovich hired Surtees because he could do that black and white, 50s look. Yeah. And I generally felt that the look of the movie was extraordinarily, again, I thought the look of the movie was more interesting than On Dangerous Ground. I thought.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. No, yeah. He did a lot. He also did The Graduate. He did a lot of, I'm not sure if he did any other film noirs. I'm just
he became a big, I think he did Ben-Hur. I mean, he became a big A-list cinematographer, but that's like everyone, he started out doing that.
Oh yeah, you're right. He did do Ben-Hur.
So I'm pretty sure, I think I read something about Last Picture Show where Polly Platt was the designer of that, and I think she was the one who said, get someone like Robert Surtees. Don't get some young kid who has no idea what this kind of look looks like,
Yeah, well, it worked beautifully. That's for sure. I felt. One thing that surprised me, that this was only 3 years after the war, was you had a main character who they portrayed as compromising with the Nazis, which, if you looked at, I actually read a book earlier this year which is all about European cinema exploring the war, and it wasn't really for well over 20 to 30 years until you started to see portrayals of people doing whatever they had to do to survive, which was very common that at the time when faced with death. I was surprised that a Hollywood film would have done, and this was MGM as well, who usually didn't do these grim films. I was surprised that they would have, because this is also just after the best years of our lives, where men were coming back to war and trying to adjust back into society, but these are men who cannot adjust and which is very noir, who have trauma and are PTSD, which we see in that tunnel scene clearly. I was surprised. I was like, wow, they're showing that, a man compromising with the Nazis. Did that surprise you? I can't think of many other films, even in the 50s or 60s, that showed that that took place during the war.
No, that's an excellent point. It's in one sense, it's a typical noir, post-war noir, in that these are inordinately about people who were damaged by being in the war.
Yeah.
And even when they're not former military people, they're figures like Hank Quinlan in Touch of Evil, who's a veteran, been doing it too long, PTSD, burnout, the typical noir character. Well, that's Dad's character on Dangerous Ground, the veteran, the person who's seen too much, been through too much, burnout. But no, you're absolutely right. I can't think of, the only other one that comes to mind, which is not really a noir, is Stalag 17, which I think has a issue about is one of the inmates cooperating or something. But I
I think
recall
so.
that
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen that, but I think so.
well, but even in Stalag 17, I think it turns out the guy cooperating is not really an American. I think he's a German pretending to be an American.
Oh, okay.
Whereas in this film, no, I think it's extraordinarily interesting because
Yeah.
that went on all the time, of course, during the war, but it was not something that was, though I have to say, there's a level of honesty about post-World War II movies that's in direct contrast to like post-Vietnam War movies. There's a level of honesty about what went on in the war and what it did to people and stuff.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
Mainly, I think in part because, first of all, people felt okay about the war. They weren't ashamed of having done it.
Right.
And the other thing is that everyone had been in it. So there wasn't this thing of, the veteran as someone who was a class apart.
Right. It
Um,
affected everybody.
and it's interesting that Janet Leigh, when she talks about how he was a bombardier shot down, it's kind of like, well, this is just something else that happened to you. It's like, well, remember the time you told me when you were in a prison camp,
Right. It
uh,
seems so normal.
it seems so normal, and that would, at the same time as there's the wonderful kind of subtext of, in general, not wanting to talk about it. It seems as if my father's character has said things to his girlfriend about it, but
Yes.
there's also the kind of sense of none of this is discussed, none of it is mentioned,
Yeah.
and
With
that's
the
certainly
yeah, that's true.
no, that's certainly. I mean, as you don't know from your experience, but that was true of the World War II generation. They didn't sit around regaling each other with war stories. That was
Right.
not the way it worked.
Yeah, you see
Um,
that because he's because Van Heflin doesn't want to talk about it at all, and he hasn't with his wife, and that's true. Whereas Robert Ryan, your father's character, clearly has talked about it with his girlfriend because she says to him, well, once we got together, things got a lot better for you, and then, so obviously there was some open discussion, but Van Heflin hasn't told his wife anything. you know? But you're right, that is very, very common because I once heard a concentration camp survivor talk about his experience, and he said he didn't talk about it for many, 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 many years for with anybody, not his family, anybody. And I can totally understand why. I mean, why would you want to bring those memories up? You know?
well, I know that I had a lot of friends who are in Vietnam, and I mean, one thing was initially that they didn't feel it was all that exceptional. Only over time did it become kind of something about, oh, you were in Vietnam and you had these experiences. But also, I think that it's hard to talk about something where it's so unfamiliar to people. Well, that's what I was saying to you before we came on about talking about growing up in Hollywood. I mean, part of the problem is that it's a world that is completely unfamiliar to people, but on the other hand, they have preconceptions about it. And
Right,
so it's kind of weird to talk about it because you kind of think, well, is this fitting with their preconceptions and stuff like that?
right,
Um,
right.
I imagine anyone who goes through a unique, in this case, difficult experience would have that problem talking about it. But that said, look at how many of the great movies of that era were about veterans and about
Yeah,
coming home from the war, and it was not ignored. I think
right.
it was only later that you started to get these Technicolor movies about, how great it was to fight in the war and stuff. I think all the early movies were like best years of our lives. I mean, they
Yeah,
were very gritty and realistic in that way.
yeah, yeah. No, that's a good point. And just we've brought up I forget her name now, the actor who played your father's girlfriend in this.
Phyllis Thaxter.
That's it. Yeah, Phyllis Thaxter is I agree. She wasn't in it as much as I would have liked, and I didn't even realize it was her until later because I really liked her in a film called The Breaking Point. Did you ever see that with John Garfield?
I don't think so. No.
Oh, okay. If you ever get a chance, oh, sorry, Thaxter. I think I was saying Thaxter, Phyllis Thaxter. She was excellent in that, and I don't believe I've seen her in much else. I don't, she, like Van Heflin, is another one. Many credits, 68 credits, but I can't think of much. I don't know if you have, or if you knew much about her.
No, in fact, that was why I was intrigued by her, because as
Yeah,
you know, I'm always interested in, I've told you, when you grow up in Hollywood, 99% of the people that you know are like Phyllis Thaxter. They're not
right,
James Stewart. They're
right,
people who are working journeyman
right.
actors. And uh, what happened, I'm looking at her resume here. I mean, she went into television, which of course is
Yes,
what you expect, but did good television. I mean, she's doing Playhouse 90 and GE Theater. I mean, that was the kind of
yeah.
A-list television. She was not, she was not glamorous. She was destined to be the beleaguered wife.
Hmm.
Uh, I really don't know any of her other movies. She has a career similar to Beverly Garland. I don't know if you know who Beverly Garland was.
I don't.
Well, Beverly Garland, here's my anecdote about Beverly Garland. Her husband built a hotel. It's still in LA. There's a Beverly Garland hotel. And I ended up staying there one time when I was down there, and I turn on the TV and there's an entire Channel 1 devoted to the career of Beverly Garland.
Oh my
So,
god.
so it was nice that her husband, loved her. So I'm watching this, and this woman has a 60-year career.
I'm
And
just looking her up now as well.
no,
Oh my god,
what happened was
197 credits, 100 and almost 200
100.
credits.
Oh,
Wow.
so I'm sitting there. We had just checked into the room, and I'm what's on TV, and I'm saying to my wife, Sandy, I'm saying, I can't believe this. I've never heard of this actress. And she had, she was in 150 movies, and I thought I knew something about movies. And then right as I say that, on the thing it says, and then she starred with Robert Ryan.
Oh god, that's
So
funny. Which movie
anyway,
was it with your
I
dad?
have no remembrance. It was actually, I think it was like a GE Theater or something like that.
Oh, okay, so it was on TV.
Yeah, she did but these are, I think, I thought Phyllis Thaxter was very good.
Yeah.
I wanted them to give her more. And because I thought that, first of all, I was surprised that she showed up in the film. I don't know about you.
I was
Uh,
too. I didn't think anyone would be tracking him down. He just seemed like a lone man.
it seemed like so unpleasant.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, but I believed her, and in fact, I wanted to know a little bit more about
Yes.
what happened before this, because it was believable. And I thought the scene where she comes and talks to Janet Leigh was very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to see more of that. It kind of reminded me of, Grace Kelly and Katie Jurado in High Noon, because near the end of that movie, they end up in the same room together, fighting over the same man.
Right.
And I actually, it's interesting because I was wondering if you'd have a scene like that now in the movies of these two strong women characters talking
Mhm.
about it. But so, in a number of ways, I wanted to know more of the backstory, and that's good. That's a good thing about a movie. You want to know more about these people.
Certainly. Certainly. Well, she plays a similar part in the Breaking Point, but it's much more in depth, which is a film I really really enjoyed. I was curious what you thought of the way in which it ended, because here we have Frank, and there's this standoff with Joe, and Joe's about to kill him, and then that loan shark comes and is about to kill your Robert Ryan's character, and then we see Frank jump in and basically saves his life. And then he first tells his wife, I didn't do it. And he seemed quite desperate to convince her. And then he looks over the body and they say, who's going to tell his wife? And he says, I will. And he walks away. It seemed to be suggesting that, Robert Ryan's character was perhaps saw that, that killing this guy was wrong in that moment or something. But I'm not sure. I thought the fact that Robert Ryan played it was in a very neutral way was interesting because, yeah, I mean, and the one he's about to kill him, the guy saves his life, and then he has to go tell his wife. He didn't strike me as someone who's going to go tell his wife to see this woman cry or be in any kind of pain. So I'm conflicted about whether or not they should have just ended it on Robert Ryan not saying a word, or having this sort of ambiguous ending about how he may have felt about what he just saw, or maybe he doesn't even know. I don't know what you thought of it.
I had the same questions.
Yeah.
I have to say, as I think about it, I'm wondering how else would you have ended it? Well, you would have ended it without Robert Ryan saying, "I'm going to talk to the wife," because what is he going to say?
What is he going to say?
Uh,
I thought it was strange. I thought they were trying to make it somewhat happy, because now this man who he was going to kill saved his life, so they felt pressure to make it, even though it's a noir, to make it a little more upbeat. But I thought he should have maybe just been totally frozen. And I mean, how could he even have processed what just happened in that short of time, to go from I'm going to kill this man to oh, he saved me? I thought he'd be speechless. That was my impression anyways.
I think you're right. And I think that, I mean, the redemption is in Van Heflin saying, I'm going to now save you instead of kill you. So that was kind of done. They felt they needed to wrap it up somehow, right? I guess they felt like we can't just have Van Heflin lying dead and say the end. We have to have something said,
Right.
But they kind of box themselves into a corner there. I don't think would they, I mean, in that, do they have to have a happier ending? I don't know. I mean, it's a film noir movie, right?
Yeah. I mean, often the noirs would either be, bleak as hell, or part of it would be bleak, and then another part of it would be somewhat optimistic, or somewhat happy, like on Dangerous Ground, where they just went for a total happy ending, or even something like The Big Heat, where Gloria Graham dies, but Glenn Ford survives and gets a promotion. So they would either find a middle ground, or they would just go totally bleak. So I think here they were looking for a middle ground where Van Heflin dies, but Robert Ryan maybe sees that this guy wasn't so bad after all, or he's somewhat heroic. But then often when they went for that, it just didn't really quite work.
No,
I mean, that was at least my take on it anyways.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, but I should say again, I mean, I think the story is very strong generally.
Definitely, yeah.
And I think that I didn't have the same feelings about On Dangerous Ground. I mean, there weren't parts of Dangerous Ground where I kind of thought I wanted to know more about this, or I wish they'd done more with that.
I agree.
Much more linear film. This is one where, and I thought, I mean, I thought all the minor actors were interesting as well. I thought the guy who plays, the quote lawyer that Mary Astor's, I looked him up. I didn't find much about him, but he'd been around forever. And these guys know that, they're in the film for 5 minutes. They know how to take advantage of it, quite frankly,
That was a really great scene, because he's being polite to him about everything, but he's just trying to pick his pocketbook. And he says things to him like, well, so what if he's dead? There's so many, it's already your fault that 10 other guys died, so what's in one more? But
Yeah, the voice of realism
I
speaking.
suppose, yeah. Right, which sets off Van Heflin's PTSD. And again, I thought that tunnel scene was quite powerful. That one of the most, for me anyways, one of the most memorable scenes.
Well, I
quite
thought
like that.
that was the scene where I saw some real acting. I mean, I think a lot of what Van Heflin does, I kind of thought, well, this is what he's like, and
Right.
it's not going to be terribly demanding, but that took some thinking and some feeling to do.
Oh, definitely.
Do
Yeah,
that
that's not
emotionally.
easy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was quite, it was it was quite responsive and emotional as he runs right towards the camera, calling out for Joe to stop going through, again, the PTSD experience. But I agree. I mean, it has its share of flaws, but overall, I could forgive the flaws because it is quite compelling.
Well,
I
it's
feel.
interesting. When I saw Dad limping,
Oh yeah,
immediately what I thought of was Captain Ahab. This kind of obsessive, going to bring down heaven and earth, for vengeance. But actually, I realized that also, and probably naturally, that was a device for those characters who played combat veterans. In Bad Dad Black Rock, that's kind of the distinctive fact about Spencer Tracy's character, is he's only
right.
got one arm. And there are a number of other movies I thought, I can't remember at the time, but I remember kind of thinking that this was a way that they literalized the wound that someone had. And it actually also served to highlight the contrast between Robert Ryan and Van Heflin,
Right.
who's this kind of blonde looking, contented, all-American guy he's like George Bailey and It's a Wonderful Life. He's selling off new housing developments.
Yeah. No, I particularly like the hearing his leg sweeping on the ground as he was trying to get in the house. You first hear him at the door, and then you see that their eyes go to the right as just you're following the sound. It was, reminding me of like Halloween, the original one from '78, with, of course, Janet Leigh's daughter, Jamie Lee Curtis, and Cape Fear, as you mentioned as well. So, no, I this was my first viewing, and I did really like it. Was there anything else you wanted to mention about it?
I don't think so. I mean, thanks, for encouraging me to watch it again.
Oh no, my pleasure.
And I've told you, I've been thinking about the movies of my dad's that I know are from this era. I actually have. There's some of them that I have not seen in a while that I'm thinking of. In fact, I haven't seen Crossfire in some time, even though that's probably my favorite movie of his. And I'm thinking of going back and kind of seeing what similarities there are, because it's interesting, because the only similarity would be from my perspective, was they star my dad, because they were all with quite different directors, all with very good directors too. It's interesting. I mean, all of the movies my dad made of that era were, Robert Wise and Eddie Dmytryk, these very, very A-list directors. So that's an interesting similarity. Again, as I told you, I mean, I don't make a point of watching these movies unless I have reason to, or unless there's something I want to show my wife about it, and sometimes what I show her, going back to an earlier point, is my wife never met my father, because we were married after he passed away. But whenever there's something in a movie where I kind of think, well, this represents what he was really like, I'll say, watch this scene, and that was more what he was like, that's kind of fun.
Had she seen any of these movies before, knowing you, or what does she generally think if she hadn't seen them? That is.
No, she hadn't seen them. And when we've been together many years, but quite frankly, she vastly preferred foreign films.
Oh, okay.
So I don't think she knew much about Hollywood movies. And also, she's not really into violence and stuff like that. So some of his Westerns would not be as interesting. We
Right.
did watch, I did show her sections of Iceman Cometh,
Oh,
uh,
right.
partly because that performance is very similar to An Astor to My Father. Also, I saw the movie being filmed, so it has a special
Right.
resonance for me. No, she has her own interests, and every once in a while, will be around industry people, and she'll take the occasion to ask about things about it, because otherwise I don't find it that interesting to talk about, unfortunately. Um, but I always love, and again, I think I said to you before we began, I mean, it's always a great pleasure to talk to you, because it's really interesting to talk to people who know these movies. I don't have much occasion to talk about it, so I really enjoy doing it.
Well, I enjoy having you, and I appreciate that you take the time and took the time again to come back on and talk about another film with your father. So come again sometime. We'll plan another one down the road, I hope, sometime.
Right. I hope so. Look forward to it.
Thank you so much, everyone, for watching and or listening. If you are currently listening to this on the audio version of my YouTube channel and you've run out of episodes to listen to, head over to the YouTube channel where every single episode that I have ever recorded can be found. Go to youtube.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies. I also want to thank all of my members on Patreon. If you're interested in supporting me over on Patreon and getting bonus content while you're at it, head over to the link patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies for full details. You can also leave a donation directly to my YouTube channel by pressing the thanks link, which you will find right below the video frame here, right beside the links that say like, comment, dislike. There will be a little heart-shaped link there that says thanks. Click the thanks link, and from there you can leave a donation directly to my YouTube channel if you wish. And lastly, if this is your first time here, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. By pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the movies logo, you will see it floating above my head in the top left corner to your top left in just a second. Just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new episodes or when I go live. Thank you so much, everyone. I will see you in the next episode.